This guide will teach you how to play Paladin at level 90 as of patch 6.4, focusing on the priority system rotation. We will be covering these subjects. Note that this guide will assume that you are acquainted with common abbreviations like GCD, OGCD and weaving, and if you are not familiar with these concepts, I have shorts explaining these. If you're still leveling Paladin, you may also find my low-level and high-level Paladin guides helpful. Now then, Fast Blade, Riot Blade and Royal Authority is your basic combo and can be performed when nothing else more important is available. Finishing a combo with Royal Authority grants you the buff Divine Might and 3 stacks of the buff Sword Oath, both of which are used on other actions. Riot Blade additionally recovers MP when used, which covers most of the MP you will spend on your attack rotation, and then some. Holy Spirit serves as your default MP spender and does significantly more damage while empowered by Divine Might. Holy Spirit should always be used to spend Divine Might before finishing another Royal Authority combo. Notably, Holy Spirit is a DPS loss to cast without Divine Might, while other options are available. This is because Holy Spirit will delay your auto attacks by 1 second, which makes it less effective than using your melee combos appropriately. Although, your full filler combo actually does more damage than Holy Spirit even without the auto attacks. Holy Spirit can be used to keep up the attack while being forced out of melee range, and is also recommended to be used for pulling bosses. Holy Spirit does not break your combos. Atonement is the spender for Sword Oath stacks, and spends 1 stack per use. Atonement deals the same damage as Royal Authority, and additionally recovers some MP on use. A notable change with 6.4 is that Atonement does not break your combos, which means that you can perform the combo Fast Blade, Riot Blade, Royal Authority, Fast Blade, Riot Blade, Holy Spirit, 3 Atonements, and then Royal Authority, if you like. This fact is going to be a cornerstone of the rotation of the Paladin, so keep this in mind. Expiation and Circle of Scorn serve as your 2 primary OGCD attacks and should be weaved on cooldown, typically together. They are both available twice per minute. Intervene serves as a gap closer, but as it also does damage, to maximize your DPS, you should use these in pairs during damage buffs. You get 2 of these per minute. Note, however, that if you are forced to run anything beyond minimal distance with your GCD fully ready, then using Intervene for its gap closing property is a larger DPS gain than the loss of it being used outside of damage buffs. Fight or Flight and Requiescat serves as your burst cooldowns. Yes, both of them, and they should always be used together. First weave Fight or Flight, then Requiescat. Fight or Flight boosts the damage of all of your attacks, and Requiescat itself is technically an attack that benefits from this. The fact that both cooldowns are 1 minute also means they both line up together. When starting a fight, delaying Expiation, Circle of Scorn, and Intervene until after Fight or Flight is applied is recommended, and as long as everything is used on cooldown, intervene in pairs. They will all line up together during Fight or Flight, every minute. Goring Blade is a GCD attack that also lines up with Fight or Flight every minute and should be used during it. I personally prefer to use it at the start of every burst, so this guide will reflect this. However, you can place Goring Blade anywhere in the burst that you prefer. Requiescat, on top of doing damage, grants you 4 stacks of Requiescat and enables Confiteor. Requiescat boosts the potency of both Holy Spirit and Confiteor, as well as the 3 blades combo that follows immediately after Confiteor. Notably, if you have both Divine Might and Requiescat, then Divine Might will always take priority for Holy Spirit, and casting Holy Spirit will not spend both buffs at once. Nonetheless, it is highly recommended to use Confiteor and the Blades combo first to avoid accidentally using Requiescat on Holy Spirit instead, which is a massive DPS loss. You can still use both Confiteor and the Blades without Requiescat, but the damage they gain from this buff is much greater than what Holy Spirit gains. Now, with all of the actions you will be using on a single target introduced, let's take a look at the opener and the priority system rotation. Before pulling, always make sure that Iron Will, your tank stance, is active, unless you have a co-tank who will be tanking first, in which case you can skip this step. 2 seconds before combat starts, cast Holy Spirit and then begin with Fast Blade. If you intend to use a tincture, a so-called burst potion, this is the time to do so. Then use Riot Blade, Royal Authority, and then weave Fight or Flight and Requiescat. Then use Goring Blade, weaving Circle of Scorn and Expiation. Then use Confiteor, weaving Intervene, Blade of Faith, weaving Intervene, then use Blade of Truth, Blade of Valor, Divine Might, Holy Spirit, and then use Atonement until raid buffs end. This then leads to the general rotation. Paladin's rotation works on a priority system, and you could even say it runs on 2 priority systems, one for the burst and one for the downtime filler. Let's start with the filler. The point of the filler priority system is to do as much damage as you can while ensuring that you are as ready as possible when the burst comes around. This means wasting nothing and preparing new Divine Mights and Sword Oaths as quickly as possible after you run out. To do this, your priority is as follows. 1. Fast Blade and Riot Blade to prepare Royal Authority to be used. This minimizes the time frame where you have no access to Holy Spirit and Atonement. 2. Atonement to spend your Sword Oaths and pass time. 3. Divine Might boosted Holy Spirit, again to spend the buff before you get another one. 4. Royal Authority once both Divine Might and Sword Oath are completely exhausted. While doing this, Circle of Scorn and Expiation should be used on cooldown regardless of whether Fight or Flight is up or not. Make sure to use Intervene if you need it to keep up the attack, and remember that when forced out of range for a while, Holy Spirit can allow you to keep up the attack, albeit at a loss over standing in melee range. The advantage of using Fast Blade and Riot Blade as the highest priority when outside damage buffs is that it minimizes the risks that you will be forced to use Fast Blade or Riot Blade during Fight or Flight due to running out of the precious Divine Might and Sword Oath buffs. Doing this also increases the probability that Royal Authority will land inside Fight or Flight, which is generally only a good thing. You simply focus blindly on this priority list until Fight or Flight and Requiescat are about to be ready. When Fight or Flight and Requiescat is ready in your next GCD window, weave both of them and then make your way through Goring Blade and the Confiteor and Blades combos. Also make sure to weave Circle of Scorn, Expiation and any intervenes you may have while Fight or Flight still lasts. As Goring Blade and the Magic Burst only fills out 5 GCDs and Fight or Flight covers 8, that means you have 3 extra GCDs to spend, and that is where the second priority system comes in. These 3 GCDs should follow this alternative priority. 1. Divine Might boosted Holy Spirit, your strongest attack outside of the 5 you just performed. 2. Atonement to spend Sword Oath stacks efficiently. 3. Royal Authority if you have spent both Divine Might and Sword Oath completely. 4. Fast Blade and Riot Blade, which in most cases just shouldn't happen, but are sometimes unavoidable. It is worth mentioning that alternative rotations exist that involve Atonement Dropping, the act of using Royal Authority to override your Sword Oath stacks to optimize the burst. These kinds of rotations are no longer considered particularly viable due to the significant DPS loss inherent in Atonement Dropping. Even if these rotations always guarantee the perfectly optimal burst, the difference between the second best is simply not big enough to justify this. For the sake of examples, the most powerful bursts include 2 Holy Spirits and 1 Royal Authority, and these are very closely followed by 1 Holy Spirit and 2 Atonements, which is going to be the most common burst you will encounter following the strategy presented in this guide. With 0 skill speed, a peculiar property of the priority system rotation is that it loops perfectly after 7 minutes of combat. That covers the offensive toolkit for a single target. Let's talk about defensive options. First, all of your spells come with a healing side effect. This is not something to plan around, as doing so will come at a devastating DPS loss. However, it is worth considering in a do or die situation. On top of this, Clemency serves as a healing option you can use to heal even more, and can be used to heal allies in a pinch. It is important to keep in mind that while Clemency does not derive any benefit from the Requiescat buff in terms of output, it will eat a stack to make Clemency instant, which you should try to avoid. Clemency should exclusively be used as a desperate measure and should not be a regularly used part of your toolkit. Give your healers a chance to help you before you resort to it, too. For actual defensive cooldowns, the Paladin has Sentinel and Rampart to reduce damage outright. I recommend using Sentinel first when you need a cooldown, unless you know you will need Sentinel specifically for something coming up shortly. Bulwark is an additional option that guarantees that all attacks are blocked for its duration. Normally, you have a 30% chance to block 20% damage from any attack, and Bulwark changes this to 100%. I recommend using Bulwark either in your defensive cooldown cycle chain, I'll get to this, or use it when anticipating tank busters. These are attacks you don't want to rely on a random chance to block. To spend your Oath Gauge, which increases by 5 on each auto attack every 2.2 seconds or so, you have Holy Sheltron, which greatly reduces damage for 4 seconds, and then reduces damage by slightly less for 4 seconds, all the while healing you for 12 seconds in total. Your Oath Gauge allows you to stockpile 2 uses of Holy Sheltron at a time, so make sure to never use them within 12 seconds of each other. I recommend using Holy Sheltron as your first option if you have 100 Oath Gauge, and otherwise it is your most reliable option whenever tank busters come up. Arm's length doubles as both a knockback prevention cooldown, but also reduces the attack speed of attackers, making it very potent. However, it does not work on most bosses, so in boss fights it is recommended to save it for the knockback immunity. Finally, for personal cooldowns, Hallowed Ground makes you completely invulnerable to most things for 10 seconds. The huge cooldown of this ability does make it best used as a panic button, or for something you planned in advance. Many tank busters can be completely nullified with it, and it also simplifies many dungeon pulls. Do take note, however, that if a tank buster comes with a damage over time side effect, Hallowed Ground will not prevent damage from this once it runs out. For the party, you have Intervention, which places a slightly weaker version of your Holy Sheltron on another target, although it is stronger if you use it while you yourself are affected by Rampart or Sentinel. Intervention also costs 50 Oath Gauge like Holy Sheltron, so make sure you don't use this if you need the resources yourself. However, Intervention is a great option to assist your co-tank in dealing with a tank buster, or helping any party member with incoming damage really. Cover is an even more powerful option for assisting a single ally. Also, at the cost of 50 Oath Gauge, you redirect everything striking the target to you, protecting them completely. This includes debuffs they are hit by, and notably, Hallowed Ground does not block damage taken by cover. However, all other defensive cooldowns will work. For the entire party, Reprisal reduces the damage enemies around you do for a bit, which can reduce the damage a boss does to the raid. This is a great option to use whenever a boss uses a raid-wide attack and Reprisal is available. Divine Veil heals your party and applies a shield based on your own max HP, making it proportionally larger for more frail party members. This can also be used when anticipating raid-wide damage, but it is even better spent if your party also benefits from the healing. Finally, Passage of Arms is a channeled action that causes you to block all attacks and makes everyone in a cone behind you take 15% less damage. This is great for massive raid-wide attacks, especially if there are no attackable targets in that time frame, meaning you don't lose any damage from the fact that you can't attack while using it. If you weave Passage of Arms momentarily, everyone behind you in the moment you use it will still take 15% less damage for around 5 seconds, an effective way to use this cooldown if there are no bigger options coming up soon. For more specific defensive options, Interject allows you to interrupt interruptible actions. You can tell that an action is interruptible if the cast bar is red and flashing and blinking at you aggressively. Simply use it before the cast finishes to completely fizzle the attack. Low Blow and Shield Bash serve as OGCD and GSD ways to stun a single target, which can serve as an alternative way to interrupt something on regular mobs. Most bosses are immune to stuns. Shield Bash can be used in a desperate situation to stop multiple enemies from attacking for a few seconds one at a time, but in most situations will find very little use, especially as it does break your combos. Shield Lob, Provoke and Shirk serve as actions to manipulate Enmity. Shield Lob is a ranged attack with a thick Enmity multiplier, making it an excellent choice for an opening attack when pulling something or picking up adds. Shield Lob does not break your combos. Provoke is your run-of-the-mill taunt that places you at the top of the enemy list of your target and then also applies a massive amount of enmity to the target. Combining Shield Lob and Provoke can allow you to safely pick up several enemies at range. Shirk passes 25% of your enmity to your target, allowing you to push your co-tank further ahead on enmity if this is necessary. Make sure to only use Provoke strategically to perform tank switches when any other tanks are present. Using it as a pulling tool should generally only be used when you are the only tank. In boss encounters, using your defensive cooldowns when you need them is often preferred, although some encounters can call for more regular use of cooldowns all the time. Defensive cooldown cycling is a lot more common in dungeons. The essence of this concept is that defensive cooldowns stack multiplicatively, which means that using 2 cooldowns at once will reduce the value of both. Furthermore, in most situations, your healer is perfectly capable of dealing with the damage you take while you have 1 appropriately powered defensive running, and using 2 will simply cause your healer to twiddle their thumbs waiting for damage to happen. As such, when doing large dungeon pulls, try to keep at least 1 defensive up on you at all times. This does not have to be planned beforehand or even be a strict sequence, but assume that any cooldown of 1 minute should be available for each pull, while 2-minute cooldowns will only be available for 1 out of 2 pulls, and plan accordingly. For an example of this, here is presented a defensive cooldown sequence that should serve you well for most dungeons. For attacking in AoE situations, you replace your Royal Authority combo and Atonement with Total Eclipse and Prominence, and replace Holy Spirit with Holy Circle. In terms of the priority system, Total Eclipse replaces Fast Blade and Riot Blade, while Prominence replaces both Atonement and Royal Authority. And of course, Holy Circle replaces Holy Spirit. Coring Blade is still worth using on up to 4 targets, but after that, you can choose to skip it. Aside from this, your rotation is unchanged. This of course means that the strongest AoE burst uses Holy Circle twice and 1 AoE combo, which is consistently prepared by using Fight or Flight after Prominence. As Holy Circle heals you, you can also prioritize Divine Might Holy Circle a bit higher if you need healing right now during your filler. However, if you need even more healing than this, I would recommend biting the bullet and casting Clemency if you have to, over casting regular Holy Circle. Finally, regarding stat priorities, take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level, as long as it has strength on it. After that, Paladin's stat priority is Critical Hit, then Direct Hit, and then Determination, and finally Tenacity. Skill speed should preferably be avoided, although if you happen to have some, it is not the end of the world. Direct Hit is recommended over Determination for tanks, as the stat is never found on their gear, and so you will almost always have less Direct Hit than Determination. And as the stats scale almost perfectly equally well, the more valuable option is always the one you have less of. Tenacity is in every aspect that matters considered a weaker version of Determination, as the damage reduction Tenacity provides is not enough to actually have a significant impact in a fight. You need an absolutely obscene amount of skill speed to fit a 9th GCD in Fight or Flight, and this is the only way for skill speed to grant any tangible benefit for Paladins. For this reason, the stat is preferably just avoided. This is not helped by the fact that your spells don't scale with skill speed at all, and no, you should not get spell speed either. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can make sure to let the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, the priority system rotation for Paladins, for a short while, was nicknamed the 7-minute loop because prior to the job's rework, all optimal rotations for the job were some sort of minute-based loop. Think 1-minute loop or 2-minute loop. Some also nicknamed the rotation the Hallowed rotation because Hallowed Ground's cooldown is 7 minutes. However, enough of the Paladin community found this to be too deep of a cut to be realistically applicable for all players to understand at a glance.